answer that. That's, how do I say this? That's up to you. Sometimes partners and parents and siblings are put in the same group, and sometimes that makes a lot of sense, and sometimes there are enough partners to have a separate group or enough siblings to have a separate group. We don't have rules about it. One thing that I think our Family Connections leaders say, which makes a lot of sense, is that it's tough if you've got a group that's extremely lopsided. If you've got 11 parents and one spouse, it's hard. But if you've got, you know, a whole bunch of parents and a whole bunch of partners, that works out just fine. So, so that's, we don't have rules about this. This is really just a question of what works for you. And it's, yeah, so I'm hoping, Maria and others, that answers your question. Okay, so let's see, where are we? That one's not in. All right, so we've got a little time. We're going to end by 4, as promised, right? That's what everybody's planning on, right? We're going to end by 4. You know, people have planes and trains and automobiles to catch, so. Okay. What is, I've got too many wires. There we go. Okay. All right, so let's, we're going to, oh dear, we're going to zoom through. Camera's getting tired after all this time. All right. All right. Let's see what we can do here. Okay. From the module on family skills, does this look like any family you've ever seen? Yeah, this is okay. The book, just that way, I just want to make sure that I know what you're seeing, you know. That's really the only issue there. So, okay, so we're trying to avoid this in some way or other. Now, we've actually already talked about almost everything that's in the family skill module. This idea of reciprocity, that we're linked together whether we like it or not. Now, you might have noticed that I sometimes use extreme examples, right? Did anybody notice that this weekend, that I sometimes use these rather extreme examples? That, aside from the fact that, you know, I don't know, perhaps I'm just a little histrionic, although in my normal life I don't think I am. The teaching reason for this, and it's actually purposeful, is that strong examples elicit strong memory because they're relevant to you. They get your attention and you remember it. Okay? It's just as a teaching tool. If you have an example that's unusual, novel, more extreme, but works, it's easier to remember. So I will say things that I'm not, my intention is not to be provocative. It's actually to try to pull your attention back. It's hard to pay attention for 2 days. It's hard. So I'm trying to facilitate that. That's, whether it's working or not, you'll have to tell me. We'll do some evaluations after the break. So, so for example, one of the things that you might have heard me say is, you know, don't soil your own nest. Okay? Why would you want to soil your own nest? Okay? And nobody would want to soil your own nest, except unless you forget that it's your nest. Right? So when you do something that you think you're simply letting the other person have it, reciprocity reminds us that what goes around comes around. Okay? Now, so pardon the scatological follow-up to soiling your own nest, okay? This is the funny little thing. So imagine you're in a car, okay? You're in the car with me. We're driving somewhere, okay? Doesn't matter. It's a couple of hours drive, okay? And we're running late. Where we're going is something you want to do. I'm perfectly content to do it with you, but we're going. And, you know, there's traffic, and we're already late. All right? Everybody with me? And you're driving. Okay? And I have to go to the bathroom. I've got to pee. What do? We're late. We're late. You don't want to stop. Suck it up, buddy. Maybe. When was the last time you had an empty milk bottle in your car? When was the last time you had...
We talked about me. We carry everything in our car.
That may be true. Okay? So, now can you see that there's part of you that doesn't want to stop? And so you could easily say, I don't want to stop. But I'm here to convince you that you do want to stop. Can you see? It's, I have to pee, right? But you want to stop because why would you want to have to clean up that mess off your seat? Right? Do you see? Okay, now pardon the scatological nature of this, okay? But, so the idea is if you get your mind around it in your wise mind, you want to stop. It's just really difficult to. Your emotion mind says, no, 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 just wait, just wait. Notice how it's easy to get invalidating when you get stuck in emotion, like you shouldn't have to go. You went right before we left. You shouldn't have had so much coffee, right? See how easy it is to become invalidating when there's pressure on us and we don't like it? Our wise mind, you do want to stop because you don't want to have to clean up the seat. Maybe it's leather. You don't want to throw out the seat. Okay? You see my point? Now, it's hard to think that, okay? It's hard to remember that, but reciprocity helps us, whether we like it or not, we're linked. So your own, it's not just your nest. It's not just your car. It's not just your boat. We're in the same boat. If we're in the same boat and I try to sink you, I'm going down too. And that might, so notice the motivation to be kinder to you does not have to be that right now I give a damn about being kind to you for its own sake. The motivation might be, I care about not sinking myself. Fine motivation. Perfectly okay motivation. Okay. Questions about that? Okay, is anybody going to forget that don't soil your own nest? Right, there it is. It's right there. Sorry about that. You're going to wake up thinking about it. Okay. Now, I just want to point out that a lot of things get in the way and make it hard to validate. When we're distressed, okay, that makes it hard. Distress and disorder is another way of alluding to dysregulation ourselves, by the way. But also, you don't have to be distressed. You can just get into habits. That we all have bad habits, bad patterns. And we forget. By the way, if that moment that you said something mean to someone you love, you were not remembering this was somebody you love. You can't be mean to somebody you love when you're remembering that you love them. You can't. That doesn't mean you can't be firm. Doesn't mean you can't give critical feedback. You can do those things while loving the person. But you can't say, you know, you're a big jerk while you're loving the person. You can a moment later remember it and feel it, but you can't do that while you're loving them. So if you can remember, just remember, wait, this is somebody I love, it comes out different. Judgments make it difficult, actually probably impossible to validate. Anger gets in the way, as we talked about. Poor self-expression. If you don't know what I'm feeling, thinking, wanting, it's hard to validate. If you don't understand it because you haven't had the same experience, it's hard to understand and hard to validate. And of course, if we're used to having poor conflict management, which means that we just jump off to the races, one person raises the eyebrow and we're both screaming at each other, right? And there's no content at all. It's just boom, 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 boom. That's a problem. And then there's this issue of lack of acceptance of reality. We're going to end the day on that, so I'll postpone that a little bit. All right, so all kinds of things get in the way of validation. Now, there's also this issue of blame, okay? Sometimes this is something we call this the blame game. You know, the idea that if we're having problems, it's your fault. I've been working with couples for, I don't know, more than 25 years. I have never, so far yet, ever had a couple come into our clinic where one or both partners said, you know what, I really messed this up, or I really need help doing this differently. 100% of the time, the person comes in and says, the other person messed this up. The other person needs to do something different. Okay? And of course, each person's saying that. Okay? And of course, that's true. The other person did it. That's true. Both of them are true, right? They're both, it's not an either or. That does, by the way, sometimes it's big marble, little marble. It doesn't mean they're the same size marbles, but both people play a role. So, blame and suffering. So when one person is blaming the other, that leads to suffering. That's especially suffering in the person who's being blamed. Of course, reciprocity tells that it does come back and affect the blamer. If the other person is blaming the other, then there's suffering in the other one. Notice everybody's suffering here. The solution is reciprocity. The solution is actually recognizing that any blame leads to everybody suffering. That's the weird thing. Anybody blaming anybody, and we all suffer. The alleviation of suffering comes out from letting go of the blame and saying, I'm unhappy, how about you? Yeah, you're unhappy, I can tell you're unhappy. How are we going to handle this? You know, or how are we going to tolerate this? How are we going to change it? Any of those things are going to be useful. Okay. Okay. Understanding dialectics, we've talked about this, the balance of apparently opposing forces, and instead of using force, just being present, synthesizing all kinds of things like what you want and what I want can be different and opposite, but we can both notice that we want things that are reasonable. And if I can't get what I want this time, then maybe you'll be more motivated to give me what I want next time and vice versa. And we get in a pattern of taking care of each other. That's different. Okay. All right, now reality acceptance or radical acceptance. I'm going to talk about this at the end of the day. But I want to spend just a second saying, okay, let's get typical scenario, okay? Most everybody's been in this situation. You go to the drink machine, in your office building, in the mall, okay, in the train station, all right? You go to the and there it says it's got what you want. You put your dollar in, whatever it costs, and of course, this time I wouldn't be bringing it up if you got your drink and were satisfied. This wouldn't be much of a story now, would it? So you put your dollar in and you push the button and nothing happens. So you hit the return button, nothing happens. Hit the button. What do you do in that moment? Huh? Yeah. I want you to know there are two kinds of people in the world. There are kickers and there are shakers. Okay? How many kickers? Okay, and how many shakers? Personally, I'm a shaker. I've never kicked it. I don't know why. I'm a shaker. Some people are incredibly sophisticated and they do both. Yeah, okay. Now, there's a reason for that, by the way. What's the reason why we do that? Who's shaked or kicked the machine and got what you wanted? Look at that. Because, in the state that I live, we have this gambling thing going on. Ching, 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 right? And why do people do that? Because every once in a great while, you win. And you can win a little bit, but they associate that with bells and lights and things like that. And other people win little bits. And every once in a while, somebody wins a lot, and that keeps people pulling. Cha-ching. Actually, you don't have to pull anymore, right? You just have to push the button. You can put your credit card in now and do it. It's very good. Yeah. So, okay, so there's a reason why. So you kick and you shake. Okay, now what do you do? Didn't work. Let's say, because who's kicked or shaked and it hasn't worked? Who's had that experience? Yeah, okay. So what do you do next? Well, obviously that's not true because you're here now. You're not kicking a machine right now. So what did you do? How did you get yourself from out of that situation? Okay, well, so who puts another dollar in? If I'm thirsty and have another dollar, I would do it, right? Now, that also tells us something about like that, you know, how desperately poor we are or are not, right? Okay. So you put another dollar. This is just for those of you who can afford the next dollar. You put the next dollar in, you push the button, and nothing happens. And now, by the way, you probably also push the other buttons because you're willing to take a different drink, right? But you've pushed all the buttons. You've pushed the return lots of times. You've kicked, you've shaken, you know, you've pounded, whatever it is you're doing, and you're not getting any money. What do you do now? How are you?
Well, now I also feel badly toward myself. Like I shouldn't have put in the second dollar. I should have known better.
Look at that. Look at that. So shame starts coming up. You got shame. Anybody angry at the Coca-Cola company? Right? Okay, now I want to point out that you're thirsty in the first place, and as you're kicking and shaking and putting money in, you're invalidating your thirst. It's not working, right? I just want to point that out, okay? And if you store, now what you've got to be able to do successfully, obviously, nobody spends the rest of their life in that moment. Okay, but sooner or later, the question is, does it end, what level of pain does it end with? Do you walk away and go get a drink of water, or do you walk away angry, go complaining about the thing, go call the Coca-Cola company, fire off several emails, okay, as your thirst goes up and up and up? Right, you see, so radical acceptance is reality acceptance, okay? What are we accepting in this situation? What are we accepting? That this machine, at this moment, salud, is not giving me a drink that I paid for, and it's not giving me my money back. You see, it's not that it's right. This is not about right or wrong, right? I mean, your implicit contract with the Coca-Cola company, they have broken that implicit contract by taking your money and not giving you the drink. Okay, fair enough. And in fact, you probably could sue them and get your money back. Okay, fine. But the reality is, at this moment, this is not the, notice this, I'm going to change this. This is not the way you're going to get your thirst taken care of. This is not the way. Reality acceptance is accepting that the reason that I came to this machine was to quench my thirst. It's not working. I need to quench my thirst in a different way. You see, that's still taking your desire, your needs seriously, and more likely to get your needs met because you're recognizing this way isn't going to work, at least not right now. I got to find another way. In order to do that, you've got to stay regulated. The more judgmental you get of the machine and the Coca-Cola company, you know, the more judgmental you get of yourself for putting in more money, the farther away you are from enjoying a drink of water. Okay, yeah. So. Right. Oh, sure. Mm-hmm. Yep. Right. So just the short answer to that is, well, how would you handle that with the machine? How would you handle that with the Coke machine? What's the reality that you're missing? If you've put hundreds or thousands of dollars into this machine and lost 90% of it, what's the reality? The reality is that it's a, what is it? It's more like a slot machine than it is a Coke machine, isn't it? No. Okay. So. Okay, so what's the reality of this moment? What's the reality? What does that say about the next machine? What could you say about the next machine?
I would be afraid every time you did a new one.
Yeah, that's a good point, but you're still doing it, you're going near it. So what does that say that you're missing? What are you missing? The reality. The reality that don't put the dollar in unless unless it's worth it and you don't mind the 90% chance of not getting it back, getting something for it. That is the reality. Now, there's a couple of possibilities here. I want to just think outside the box a little bit. Without blaming anybody, sometimes machines are misleading. Sometimes they're inaccurate expression. It says this is the Coca-Cola button. You push it. You know you push the Coca-Cola button, and you get Fanta. Right? That's what happens with accurate expression. You try to validate it, and it's not validating, you know? So sometimes that happens. That's one thing can go wrong. Sometimes you're putting a dollar in, but it turns out that you're in Mexico. It doesn't take dollars. It takes pesos, you know? That's not going to work. It keeps eating your, it's lovely. It's very happy to have your dollar. It's just, it's not going to work, okay? You see? So the question is always, you know, but the point is that the transaction's falling apart. It's not working. The transaction isn't working. You can assume that the machine is broken. That's what everybody assumes, okay? And when it comes to Coke machines, that's almost always right. Although I have to say, I did have a time when I did that, and I wasn't putting in American money. I actually had some coins that were from another country that was silver, looked like a quarter. I thought it was, and I kept putting it in, and it wasn't giving. The machine was getting 75 cents plus, you know, a 10 kroner Swedish coin that looked like a quarter, or five kroner, and you know, which is worth about a quarter. You know, it's about the same, but you know, was getting that, and it wasn't. You know, the machine wasn't broken. I was putting I wasn't paying attention to the money I was putting in. That actually happened once. So, but it could be that we're doing something that's not, the transaction's breaking down. All we know is this isn't what I'm doing is not producing my desired response. That's all we know. Reality acceptance is all the things we do to get there. And I'm going to come back to that, but I just want to point out that acceptance here does not mean you like it. It doesn't mean you like it, okay? What it does mean, however, is that you're accepting the reality and then getting unstuck. Okay, as a therapist, okay, I want to say that one way to think about problems that people have, and I'm talking about ordinary problems that families have, ordinary problems, not just extraordinary problems, is just like this soda machine example. It's a situation where you can't get what you want, non-change, change is not possible, and you can't let go of trying to get it. You can't accept it. So you can neither get what you want, nor can you stop trying. You keep doing the thing that's not working, right? Right? Remember the definition of sanity is you do the same thing over and over again expecting a different result. Right? I mean, that's a funny definition of insanity, sort of. But, you know, so what's the solution to non-acceptance, non-change? I can't accept it and I can't change it. Acceptance means, of course, you back away and go get a drink of water. That's acceptance. Change is, you know, you put money in and you get your drink. But you can't do that, and you can't do either one right now. What's the solution? It's not easy, is it? But think about sticky situations in your life. Doesn't that actually describe them? You can't get what you want, and you can't let go of it. Right? The solution is either more effective change or acceptance. Not the same attempt to change, but some different way of getting the change, or accepting the reality that I can't get what I want. I can't get what I want. That doesn't mean you like it, but it does get you to back away from the machine. Hands up, back away from the machine. You know, it's kind of like, it's like it could be helpful to have somebody say that. Okay, we're going to come back to this because there's a lot of steps in how to do that. I just want to point out that reality acceptance is not a bad thing. It's just a painful thing, right? Now, this is everything from not getting the drink, and I don't mean to equate this with some of the more difficult things, like having a loved one who doesn't love you anymore. Right? Have you ever been dumped in a relationship? That's painful. It's painful. That's hard to accept. There's different parts of that. Or having a loved one die, especially if they're not very old. Okay? Not to say that it's easy when somebody's 99 dies. Okay, it doesn't mean it's easy. But I think acceptance is easier when a person's 99 than when they're 19 or 39. Okay? Does that make sense? Right? Acceptance is really hard. I'm not saying this is easy. I'm simply saying that reality acceptance is then the person is dead. That is the reality. That doesn't mean we like it. Okay? But if we can accept the reality, that can get us to step back from the machine. Okay. I'll come back to how to do this later, but is everybody on board with, there is some virtue in accepting reality as opposed to fantasy? That's the key piece here. There's pain in accepting reality, because when I step back from the machine, I've got to cope with my loss. Right? Notice that when I accept the death of my grandmother, okay, who died a long time ago, when I accept it, what that means is I can't really maintain the idea that I'm going to see her again. I have to accept my loss. There's a loss there. If I keep trying, I don't have to feel the loss. So it's not, you see, so the anger makes a lot of sense because can be an escape from, I don't have to feel the other emotion that could be more profoundly disturbing. Okay. All right. Well, actually, let's do this now. Since it showed up, I didn't think it was going to show up here, but here it is. So we'll do it now. Never mind. Okay. 3 steps. How do you do it? All right. So back to the machine. Cease and desist. The first place is what I call this behavioral talk. By the way, for those of you who are DBT-oriented people, I organize this a little different than Marcia does, but it's the same thing as what she calls radical acceptance. I just think radical acceptance is too big a step. So I've divided it into 3 steps. That's all. It's the same thing. It's just that I've taken the 1 step of Marcia's and broke it into pieces. So I think is perhaps a little bit more approachable. The first one is, so let's say that your loved one is driving you crazy with something. Okay? I don't know. What are your loved ones? Take a simple one now, not the profoundly disturbing ones. Take ones that seem small to you. Right? What do your loved ones do that's drives you crazy, but not dangerous?
Leave the dishwasher door down.
Yeah, leaves the dishwasher door down. Yep. Messy room. Lots of negative talking. Texting during conversation. Eats meals in her room. Right. I don't think anybody would question how these things could be upsetting, right? I just want to say, you don't like it, right? It's just something you don't like. You wish were different. Okay? And it could be anything from what you might imagine is not a big deal, but feels like a big deal, okay? Like dirty socks in the corner instead of in the hamper, okay? Which if that drives you crazy, I am not saying that it shouldn't. And I'm not saying it's small. I'm simply saying it's not dangerous. That's all I'm saying, just not dangerous, okay? But it could be very upsetting. You might really dislike it. You might have asked 1,000 times. I've worked with families. Some of the common ones I hear are, these are actually very common ones. Other ones I hear is like, she drives in the wrong gear, right? At 30 miles an hour, you should be in 3rd gear, not 5th gear. I'm not saying this. This doesn't drive me crazy, okay? I don't know if this happens. If you drive an automatic, you can't appreciate this, but the engine sounds different, and it's just the person's just, that's the wrong gear. It's just driving me crazy, okay? What else? Not using the turn signal or leaving it on, not using it at all, changing lanes without using it, or driving too fast, driving too slow. Road rage is actually dangerous. So let's leave that one out. But yes, that could drive. I want to start with the non-dangerous ones, and we're going to come to the dangerous ones because they're even harder. My point here, just to telegraph it, is that even the things that look like they're simple are extremely difficult to get to radical acceptance about. And when we get to really dangerous things, that's going to be even harder. Okay? Yeah. Hopping into the shower 10 minutes before it's time to leave. That's right. Calling and saying, what time are we leaving? At the moment you said that they were going to pick you up. Yes. Okay. Everybody got something in mind? All right. So let's imagine, I don't know. Let's take a simple one. So let's imagine that my wife leaves her she comes home. She doesn't actually do this, but let's imagine she comes home and she dumps her shoes and her socks and her stuff, just dumps them on the bottom stair. Okay, she doesn't, but let's imagine she did. And that just drives me crazy. Okay. You with me? Okay. So what happens over time? This drives me crazy. I come home, I walk in the door, that's the first thing I see. How do I feel? I'm judgmental. She shouldn't do that. She's told me 5,000 times she wouldn't do it. I've asked her 10,000 times not to do it. 50% of the time she says she won't. Okay. There it is. It's dangerous. Somebody's going to trip on this. No one ever has, but somebody could trip on this on the stairs. Okay. How do I feel? I'm angry, right? Because I'm being judgmental. She shouldn't do it. She's inconsiderate. She's, selfish. She doesn't follow through. She's not considering me. Damn it, I do things that she wants me to do. Why won't she do things that I want her to do? Okay? Unappreciative. She's unappreciative and I'm unappreciative. And, okay? And this, by the way, these are not fully coherent thoughts. They all occur in about a half a second at the moment I see the stuff, which is not stuff in my head. It's not stuff. When I see her shit at the bottom of my stairs, right? Okay? And then I got 10 feet to walk until I'm in the kitchen. I get to the kitchen. What does my face and body posture say? Am I, honey, I'm home? Does it say that? What does it say? Says that? What it says when I come around the corner is I'm not delighted to see you. Some version of that, okay? At the very least, I am not delighted to see you. Maybe when you're angry at somebody and being judgmental, so with Rosanna, I'll make, if I'm happy to see you, Rosanna, look, is this what it looks like? Oh, there you are. Look, immediately there's eye contact and I smiled and she smiled. That's just boom, 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 like that. I can't not do it. You're looking at me and smiling. I'm not being judgmental of her, at all. I'm not angry at her. She smiles. I can't, it's just, there it is. I can't help myself. You see? Somebody you like, they smile at you, you're not being judgmental, automatic, there we are. And if this were the situation, it's like, we're happy to see each other. And then that's right? What do I bring to the table for the conversation? How does the person respond? So the alternative is, I come in, and I come into the kitchen. There's Rosanna. Rosanna, look up and smile at me. I go to play with the kids. Sorry, not the kids, but How did that feel? Yeah, frustrating. Yeah, of course. So you see the transactions. Now you can say, I want to point out, the transaction could have started when she put her shit on the stairs. Okay? You could say that, or you could say the transaction started when I reacted to what was on the stairs, or you could say the transaction actually started when I didn't make eye contact and she was happy. She was about to be happy to see me, but now is not so happy to see me. You see? So now maybe this goes on for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then by the time I played with the kids for a while, and maybe she's cooking dinner, and What about, damn, she's flat sec, yeah, no, for sure she is, she says. In my house, it's not so for sure. So, you know, I mean, it could be that I'm cooking dinner, it just depends, you know, I mean, either one of us do that. So, but, you know, it's your night, you're cooking, and so by the time I waddle over into the kitchen, for, you know, it smells good, and then I'm starting to eat, and the kids are playing, and maybe my mood has shifted, and I've forgotten about what's on the stairs, and then we start to talk, and maybe the rest of the evening is pretty good. Okay? So, how much time did we lose? Oh no, 20 minutes minimum, okay? At least. I mean, how long, if I'm pretty committed to she's unappreciative, and this actually gets my arousal up, and it's gonna take some real distraction with the kids and some time before I can let that go, before I'm willing to smile. There's a loss, if we take it, like if I come around the corner and I'm happy to see you, as opposed to 20 minutes later, I'm happy to see you, that's the 20-minute loss I'm talking. And I'm saying 20 minutes because I think that's very conservative. I think it could be a lot longer. So, but everybody okay with that? I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be right. Maybe it's 10 minutes, but yeah.
Things like that, or, you know, in our lives, pick your battles. How does that?
Well, hang on, you're ahead. I'm going to try to go a different direction. I'm not going for picking the battles, because picking your battles is still a change-oriented strategy. This is an acceptance-oriented strategy, which I want to, if you have the skill to accept, you have the choice. Doesn't mean you're going to. That's what it's about. So you pick your battles means, am I going to try to change this now? And that's a totally reasonable question, but that's on the change side of the world. I'm living on the acceptance side of the world for the next 10 minutes, okay? So behavioral tolerance means that I notice that, you know, it's been 17 years, you know, that, you know, Rosanna's been leaving her stuff on the stairs, okay? And 17 years times, you know, 200 times a year, that's 3,400 times I've complained about it. And perhaps, you know, 2 or 3 times a year, so 51 times she's cleaned it up, and then the rest of the time it's back to being a mess. I'm not so successful at getting her to clean it up, okay? Anybody want to blame her, think she's a bad person, by the way? That's not my goal, okay? I'm trying to pick that they're good. Absolutely. I'm in my wise mind, I'm not at all, and I don't want you to either. The point is that, you know, we could figure out why she's doing that, but it's probably got nothing to do with me, okay? And I'll come back to that. Now, so behavioral tolerance is, I recognize that it's not working very well in our relationship, and I haven't been able to change it. Maybe I could consider acceptance. Maybe I could consider it. Maybe. And so the first step is behavioral tolerance. Well, in order for me to consider acceptance, I have to stop doing the thing that makes it worse. Okay? I simply have to stop doing it. So that means that when I come home and I see the stuff on the stairs, I've got to say, okay, it's there. I don't like it. I wish it weren't there, but instead of trying to implicitly use my anger to get her to stop it, I'm actually going to not try to do anything that communicates my displeasure about this today. I'm going to simply not try to change it today. I'm not going to do anything related to change today. I could change my mind about that later, but today I'm in I'm in tolerate it mode. Just tolerate it mode. Okay, toleration is not the same as acceptance, by the way, but it's a piece of it. So what I do is I say, okay, it's there. That's the way it is. And what was I feeling before I came in the door? I was happy to come home. So I'm going to wait a minute. I'm going to remember that moment before I came in the door, and I'm going to bring that with me when I get around the corner, if I can. And I'm going to see what happens. Or I'm going to bring my annoyance with me, but I'm going to at least pay attention to what happens. I'm going to cease and desist. I'm at least not going to criticize. I'm not going to complain, at least. So, and what happens is, the second step is this being mindful of the pattern. Okay? So this is about, if I do that for a few days, I might notice, you know what? What happens is, what we did instantly, but it's going to probably take me a few days, maybe even a few weeks. I'm going to notice, you know what? My being upset about the clothes on the stairs is actually resulting in 20 minutes of lost relationship time every day, sometimes longer. I'm upset, I don't engage, she withdraws, it takes time before we finally are talking to each other again. Sometimes it takes the rest of the evening, but it seems to always take at least 20 minutes. Okay? I noticed that. If that's true, that's the pattern, then we could say, so on the one hand, I've got the advantage if I keep trying to change this. Okay? And we'd have to say that my annoyance is my attempt to change it. My once a month conversation about why is this shit on the stairs is my attempt to change it. Okay? I've got to notice that the advantage of that is that someday she might change it. And that's unlikely. But there's a slim chance that I might get what I want. The cost of all that attempting is 20 minutes times 5 days a week. That's 100 minutes a week times 50 weeks in a year. Okay? That's 5,000 minutes. Do the math, that's about 70 hours. Okay? No, it's actually more. It's 80. 70, how many hours is that? 500 into 6. Oh, yeah, 80 hours. More than 80 hours. Okay? 80 hours a year are lost in our relationship. Is it worth trying to continue to achieve the slim outcome that she's going to start picking her clothes up to lose 80 hours of our relationship a year? Is it worth it? There's no, by the way, there's only one person who can answer that, right? That's me, okay? You can answer that for you. And that's where you're left with, if you're mindful, then you can decide, is it worth it? This is the reality of what's going on. Distant, slim chance of this, that's a possibility. This is the reality of what I'm getting when I'm trying to do this. When I try to get the other person to change, this is the consequence. When I keep kicking and shaking the machine, there's a chance, but it hasn't given me the drink. The costs are, I'm getting thirstier, I'm hurting my hand, people are thinking I'm crazy, okay? I feel embarrassed about my own out-of-control behavior. Those are the costs. The benefits are the possibility, okay? Now, for certain things you might say, you know what, it's so important to me to get this, it's worth it. It's worth it to me. And that's why I said the dangerous behaviors are different, because the dangerous behaviors, I'm not sure that we should or would quit trying. You know, the dangerous things. I don't know. There's probably some scenarios where we would and some where we wouldn't. But if we're going to let go, we've got to, when we say let go, we say this, therapists say this so nonchalantly, you just have to let go. You know, my analogy is that's like saying, you know, I have been wrapped up with duct tape to the fire pole like this, like a pretzel, okay? And there's duct tape and duct tape and duct tape wrapped and wrapped around. A new layer is wrapped every day, my entire life. And you're saying, just let go. Okay, how do I do that? Okay, but we have a fondness in therapy to say what the end point is, as though just go to the end point. And that word just is, so condescending, as though this is easy, as though, you know, but in fact, just let go. That's the goal. How do I do it? Okay? So this is the how to do it. You've got to unwrap yourself one piece at a time. And the unwrapping requires motivation. You've got to actually weigh the pros and cons. But first you've got to be aware. And then you've got to say, if I'm going to let go, that means I'm never going to get what I want. I'm never going to have the stairs clean. That's what I want. I'm never going to get that. Or almost certainly never going to get it. And that's really sad. That's a loss. That's an enormous loss. I put a lot of energy into this. It's important to me. This is where it's very easy to self-invalidate and say, this isn't a big deal, I shouldn't want it. But in fact, the fact is you do. If it's bugging you, if it's been bugging you for 17 years, it's a big deal to you, period. It just is. That's reality acceptance too. If it is a big deal and you're never going to get it, that's a big loss, and it's time to start grieving. If you start to grieve it, you may find that that's helpful. You might say, you know, because you're doing two things. One is you're validating the legitimacy of you having wanted it, and at the same time, the fact that you're not getting it. Now you're living in reality. That combination of two things starts to be a lot more like reality than where you've been for the last few years. Because you've flipped back and forth from the unreality of it shouldn't bother me, but it does, that's not reality, to the unreality of she should just pick this stuff up, which obviously isn't reality because she hasn't done it. It's not that easy. She's got the duct tape around her too, okay? So now I'm entering reality, grieving a legitimate loss. I'm not invalidating myself. I'm not invalidating her. I'm grieving the loss, accepting the reality of the situation. Now, it might help to have some idea about, I might be able to tell a different story why she might leave her stuff on the stairs, and I'm going to get to that in a second, okay? That's going to come last. We often try to start there, and I don't think it works very well. So here's the thing. So now I start to feel, I see the stuff and I say, that is my life. That is my real life. Wish it weren't there, but that is my real life. Okay? That's the two parts of the reality. I wish it weren't there, but it is. Okay? You see, and I'm sad that it still is. I am sad. I found my primary emotion about it. Notice I'm not angry anymore. I'm sad. I'm not getting what I want. Or I'm getting something I don't want. Okay? And if I can take 2 or 3 breaths of sadness at that moment, then I can go to the last step and say, okay, I'm not getting this. What am I getting? What am I getting? Notice it's not because I'm getting something that this shouldn't bother me. This does bother me, but let's make a bigger context. I'm not only getting a partner who leaves her stuff on the stairs, I'm also getting a partner who, when I come home, is cooking dinner or playing with the kids, okay? Or when she comes home and she throws her stuff on the stairs and I'm cooking, she actually comes home and plays with the kids and is very happy that I'm making her dinner. I get a partner who's coming home every day. That's not bad. You see? Does this make sense? Now, the trick here is not to say, because I've got all these lovely things, this shouldn't bother me. That's back to unreality. The reality is, I wish it were different. But now the reality is much bigger. The big reality is, well, I've got these things that are really nice and this thing I don't like. I got the whole package. Feels different than if the only thing I see is the daily shit on the stairs. Instead of her stuff is on the stairs and she's here, I'm happy to see her, she's playing with the kids, I get a nice dinner, and then I come around the corner and I'm happy to see her, and the transaction goes completely differently. Does this make sense? Now, one added bonus here, okay? Hang on one sec. One added bonus, and I don't mean at all to be extreme, okay? But I just want to point out that there's another piece of this reality that's very, very important, and as a society, we tend to poo-poo and minimize. But you are the people who know that we shouldn't, and that is this issue of life and death, okay? If my wife just spent, a couple of years in and out of hospital because she was suicidal on and off, it might be nice to know, she's also alive. She's home. She hasn't divorced me. She hasn't killed herself. These are not trivial things, okay? And I would argue they are not trivial things if you've got a partner who's never been suicidal. We're all going to die. We're all going to die. The day when either I don't come home or she doesn't come home is going to happen. It is going to happen. I don't plan on it happening this week or this year, and hopefully not next, and hopefully not for a long time. But it could be next week. It could be next year. Maybe it's 30 years. I don't know. I have no idea. But that day will come. Right? I'm not trying to be, kind of extreme, but that could help us say that helps get to what matters to me. It's what matters more. It's not that, again, not to invalidate the stuff on the stairs drives me crazy. I wish it weren't there. And I have the rest of my life. Do I want to diminish the rest of my life because of this? Or do I want to compartmentalize this into something that I don't like, but I can actually still like the other parts that are there? Like she's home and alive and playing with our kids. Does that make sense? So, now, this is hard to do. And if you're going to do it successfully, you have to practice. And you have to practice with little tiny things. Because it's too hard to practice with the big things. You can't. In my experience, it's very hard to practice with socks on the stairs. Right? It's actually, that's enough practice. The socks are on the stairs. That really, actually, you wish weren't on the stairs. It's going to take actually probably some weeks before you can recontextualized. So the socks come to mean my sweetie is home. And I wish the socks weren't on the stairs. Instead of, damn it, the socks are on the stairs. Why did she do that? Which only implies that she's home. You see? So the meaning, we get the meaning out of what we're mindful of, what we pay attention to. There's reality, which includes both the socks and everything else. What we choose to pay attention to, we can learn to manage ourselves. Okay? Does this make some sense? Yeah, okay. So Sylvia was first. Sylvia wanted to sorry. Oh, either way. Yeah. Okay, so how do I say this? My guess is that this is oh, I'm trying to stop myself before I get going here. I can't do it. Okay, two things. I'm accepting my urge. Okay. One is, just in a validating way, if you haven't thought of a story that would satisfy you yet, you're probably not going to. Okay? What you're looking for is an interpretation. But your interpretations, if it's driving you crazy, all of your interpretations that you've come up with so far are probably making it worse, not better. So I'm not sure that trying to find the interpretation that's going to break this up is any different than finding the dollar in your wallet that's going to work. I'm not sure it's any different. So could you? Sure, of course you could. And could that happen once in a while? Maybe. The cynical part that I was trying to stop myself from saying was a lot of therapists make a lot of money trying to help you find just that right interpretation that will make the whole thing dissolve. And that's the epiphany that never happens. Okay? That's the epiphany that never happens. Disrespect is a huge concept. It's a huge concept. I mean, disrespect, oh my gosh, maybe she's busy. Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, okay, but yeah, you're talking about earlier in the chain before this has been driving you crazy for years and years. You're talking about actually asking her. And I actually think that's a great idea. Asking her is a great idea if you're willing to accept the answer. If you're going to invalidate the answer, though, which you didn't, which is great. I mean, the answers that are probably the most descriptive are saying, okay, the room is a mess. I want to understand. And frankly, for most kids, it's because I don't care. It doesn't bother me. Right? But if you're a neat person, you can't understand that. Right? And if you're talking about a mismatch, you're talking about somebody who's probably really different from you temperamentally, it's probably very hard to understand. But then of course, because a lot of people would then say, well, it doesn't bother you, but it does bother me. You're being so selfish. This is my house too. You see? So now I didn't accept that it just doesn't bother it, but not bothering you means that you're being selfish. Selfish is a huge concept again, a big interpretation again. It's not mindful of the person's experience. Does this make sense? I'm not saying that those aren't the things that people say. I'm saying they just get us into the toilet. That's where they get us. And so, but I would encourage you always to ask and try to understand it if you're willing to accept the answer. That's hard to do sometimes, though. And the answer could be, I leave my room a mess because I know it drives you crazy. Right? And by the way, that doesn't mean that's true. That just means that's the explanation, right? Why did you clobber the kid with the toy? Because she made me mad. Is that really an explanation? No, it's not an explanation. Remember the explanation? I'm not going to say it again, right? Well, in my history with you, it's like, yeah, okay. So, all right, yeah. Right, which is a fallacy, but that's okay. Go ahead.
But we also embody that.
Yeah, we do.
And so we kind of realize, I think, in a way, being able to detach ourselves and engage the from the kind of sometimes from having self-belief, but that we do have self-determination and that other people also.
Right, right. But I think self-determination is a lofty goal, but it's a myth. It's a fantasy, right? Seriously, I'm not trying to make a political statement, but you can't function in the world by yourself. The world shapes us. I'm not saying that self-determination is entirely wrong. It's only wrong by itself. I mean, there's I contribute and you contribute, and there's a transaction. It's not this one or that one. It's us transacting. Self-determination says it's all on this side. Self-determination is nature, right? But it's nature in the person, and non-self-determination is nurture. It's all about the environment. Well, it's neither of those. It's neither of them. You can only consider the one in the context. You can't consider the concept of light without the concept of no light. There is no such thing as light if there's no place that's dark. Right? So light only makes sense in with a corresponding opposite. It doesn't make sense, right? Fish don't know no water. There's just water, right? Especially like fish that don't jump out of the water. There's no such thing. Mosquitoes don't know. You get the idea. So. That's right. But change, I'd be the last person that would say change is impossible. It's just that a given specific change in a given particular moment may not be possible. That drink machine may never give me the drink. But if that's on my hallway outside my office, and it's important to me to have access to that, I could probably have the skills to get a new machine installed in the next few months, or to get it fixed in the next couple of weeks, so that it would work better for a long time before it does that again. So change is possible. That's not a crazy idea, okay? But today, right now, I'm not getting what I want. And for something like, but some specific things aren't possible, right? I mean, some things aren't possible. Like, I'm never going to be an astronaut, no matter how much I want to be. I'm never going to be. I appreciate that, but you know what? They're not taking me. They're not taking me. I don't have, I have 5% of the requisite requirements, and I'm too old, so it's not going to happen. All right, so yeah, done.
I had a really hard time with an issue.
Yeah.
I think I felt like in my radically extended, I think you said yesterday, except that it's for like you had with change. I felt like I was giving up on my daughter.
Hmm.
And,
Can I just for everybody else, can I say that just slightly differently? Because I think I know what you mean, but I want to be clear. The life that you've had so far is not what you wanted. It's not what you planned back then for the intervening time. But you now have the life that you have, and that doesn't mean it can't be better from this moment forward. But you can't change the past.
and if I think about it, there's nothing that's happened in my life that is exactly the way I planned it. But yet when it came to my daughter, I had this, I just couldn't give it up. That she was going to go to college and this and this
Yeah.
and this. And so accepting that she has this disease, accepting that it's beyond my control to fix it for her, I felt if I did that, I was saying, I care she died. And that was really, really hard.
Right.
But I'll also say the other thing I learned
Oh, that's a fine word.
But,
That made sense to me.
but letting that go is
Yeah.
actually comforting in a way.
Yeah, of course.
And I don't feel guilty about it
It's
anymore.
comforting because you're living in reality. You're living in reality. You're not fighting reality anymore. Go ahead.
I was thinking of this earlier, and I wanted to bring it up. It was interesting on the teleconference, you reached out to whether spouses and siblings should be in the same group. What I think is interesting is it's a different process for different people.
Absolutely.
The spouses and siblings are used to it or feel like they should have an equal relationship. Or I think parents may have a little bit easier time with each other. But on the flip side, like the messy room or the stairs, I think parents in the home situation feel like they should be in charge. And it's hard, so I think there's different situations that parents are better at and different situations that spouses or siblings are better at. And I just find it an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, it also depends a little bit on the match and the mismatch. Because it could be that there are people in your family, whoever they might be, different relationships, that you have more things in common. So when I say not just what you don't have, but look at what you have, sometimes you look in the cupboard, it's kind of bare. There's not that much there. That's part of reality too. I mean, I've worked with couples where one partner says, I don't want to do that because if I look, we'll just separate and divorce. So I'll see that I don't want to be with this person. So what they're saying is I want to pretend that the other person can change to be the person that I want them to be because that keeps me in a relationship that I don't enjoy. Okay, fine. If that's what you want to do. That doesn't sound very wise mind to me, but if that, and so, and sometimes that's just hopelessness. Like, no, there are things, but sometimes it's true. It's like there's not that much of a relationship there. There's not that much. Now, that's harder to say as a parent. It's much harder to say that than it is with a friend. Somebody who was a friend and now you've grown apart. Something like that. It's, it could be, but I want to point out there's still a loss. There's a huge loss and there's grief. Even if, do you ever have this experience, that those of you who are old enough to have had this kind of thing, where you had a childhood friend, was a really dear friend, and you just kind of lost contact. You never had a falling out, but one person moved away or went to a different school or something like that. And then you had a chance to meet up later, okay? And there are two different experiences. One is you meet up and you pick up where you left off and it's lovely. And the other is you think, why were we ever friends? Okay? But at latter example, okay, in the first example, there's no loss, except you say, gosh, I wish we hadn't waited, 20 years to get together again. So there's a little loss, but it doesn't feel that bad because you got it now, okay? But the other one, like you're losing this idea of your friendship, which, by the way, was probably real when you were 15. But 15-year-old relationships are different than 35-year-old relationships or 55-year-old relationships. And, there's loss. There's like, gee, this isn't what I would have liked, So there's still this grieving that has to happen, and that's painful. No, wouldn't choose him today. This person did. Right. Right. Yeah, it's complicated.
And also, as far as accepting, sometimes when, I think I have to accept that my daughter, it is a possibility that my daughter will commit suicide, I think it's a strong possibility, and it's a very hard thing to accept that.
Well, hang on. Let me be clear. This is where our language precision matters, okay? What you just said I could interpret in one of two ways. I could say you could say it's very hard to accept. Are you accepting the fact? The fact is that it's a risk.
I think I'm accepting the fact that it can happen.
The fact that it can happen.
And
That's correct.
I don't want to accept that, but I do believe it's a reality that it can happen.
the reality of it, right, the possibility. And by the way, that's true for 95% of the population, right? I just want to be clear. It's just not as salient to most people. Okay? People do kill themselves. And I'm not cavalier about this in the slightest. So, but accepting that it's a risk, I'm not sure, I guess what I'm saying is, on the one hand, we're not saying that much. That is a reality acceptance.
I think she's been, because I think she could be.
Right, her risk might be higher than a random person. That's right. I'm sure that's true, right?
And then I also know that.
But that's not the same as accepting that she's going to kill herself,
No,
because
I'm not
we don't
saying
know
that
about
at
the future.
all.
We don't know about the future.
I'm
No,
not
I hear
saying
that. That's why I want to clarify. I don't think you are.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying that she's going to. I think it's a reality that can happen.
Right, right. And even that has pain,
Yeah.
right? And she's alive today. Yeah. And that's, of course, the part of recontextualization is this is a risk. And that risk is a proxy word for she's had a lot of pain. Okay? That's the reality, is that she has had a lot of pain and suffering. And the recontextualization is she's alive now. She's not dead. And so there are all kinds, I don't know your daughter, but it's like, then there's the reality of also what you're missing if you only focus on her risk. And I don't want you to invalidate the risk or the pain, but I don't want you to focus exclusively on the risk and the pain, because then you miss everything else. And everything else is really important. It's not the only thing.
I think that what is crucial to achieve that acceptance is the second point, which is to believe in the laws.
Mm-hmm.
Without believing in laws, without
You
believing
can't get to radical acceptance.
get there.
Right.
And it's quite difficult to do it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes this confusion that is like, I want to accept the truth. But I don't accept it, but I say, leave. That's what I'm going to get.
Right. Yeah. No, the grief is essential and hard to do. Who wants to choose to grieve something? You know, there are all kinds of benefits to escaping and pretending. There are all kinds of benefits to unreality, to fantasy. It's the only, but there's also this enormous cost. You're living in reality. Everything else is still possible. Not the thing that's not possible, but the things that are possible are now possible. And we can pay attention to those. It's empowering. It's enormously, anybody who's done this, it's enormously empowering to radically accept the loss, because you're not living in unreality anymore. Yeah.
So I wanted to share a little bit of the same experience I had when I shared at Rockland Conference about how my son did commit suicide and how I came to accept that death. And part of me was glad that he was out of pain. And it was like, does that mean that he should have killed himself? And I said, no, I don't think so. So I can both accept the fact that he's gone and grieve that, and be glad that he's out of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And feel like he shouldn't have, that I would prefer him not to
Absolutely.
do
Of
it.
course. Of course.
And
That's where
that
the grief
gave
comes
me
from.
The freedom then to say, it's an unfortunate event that, rips me apart
Sure,
in many ways.
It's got to be terribly
It's
painful.
terrible. But it doesn't mean that there's nothing else.
That's exactly
that
right.
I'm still going on, and I still have things
That's
to do
right.
in my life. And when my daughter then threatened to commit suicide, it's like, well, not again was part of it, but
Sure.
also there is no control. If somebody wants to kill themselves, they're going to. You can only do your best to really
Right.
be there for them in the moment.
That's
with
right.
your right mind.
That's right.
As much as you can. And
Right.
after that, you just have to accept that it's happening.
That's right. Well, hopefully we do accept the reality. People don't sometimes. And it makes sense because
Well,
there's a
then
lot of
you're
grief.
stuck.
Then you're stuck.
Because
I
you don't
agree.
accept it.
I agree.
And just like you were saying, accept the reality that it might happen, that gives you freedom.
Right. You know, the thing is that acceptance does not mean you like it. Let's just be clear. Acceptance does not mean you like
And it
it.
doesn't mean I'm glad he's dead, just.
No, heavens, no, of course not.
But,
It means that you accept the reality that that is, and you're now free to look for everything else
right,
that is possible, because him being alive is no longer possible, as sad and awful as that is. But other things are possible, and you can put your energy, more of your energy into that, and probably always some energy into grieving. But
and I think that what the point I wanted to make is, it was the radical acceptance that
Right.
provided that freedom,
that's right.
that I didn't have to solve the equation, both of them.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, thanks. So I want to leave you with a little homework on this subject. Radical acceptance is something that's very powerful when you do it. And when you need it, it's hard to do. And so it's a little bit like swimming when you fall off the boat. When you fall off the boat, right, in the windstorm, you know, that's not the time to think about a swimming lesson. Right? The swimming lesson, it's good to have the swimming lesson before you go on the boat. So, practice this. Pick something that is the smallest unit you can think of that's still driving you crazy. Okay, it's big enough to bother you. And decide, I'm going to try radical acceptance for a month. I'm going to go through these 3 steps slowly. Take yourself seriously. If you decide to stop trying to get the other person to change, feel sad. Let yourself grieve the loss. You're not getting something in your life that matters to you. If it didn't matter, it wouldn't bother you. So allow yourself to grieve the loss. And then find the rest of the story. What have you been missing with all this attention to what you don't have? What have you been missing? What else is there? I think you'll find you'll be glad you tried it on something small when you have the skill for something big. Okay, so let me pause for just a second. We're making a transition into validating skills, like as though we haven't talked about validation 10,000 times in 2 days. Is this a good time to stop and take a break? Yeah, Marie Paul? I don't need a break. No, we're fine time-wise. We're fine. Validation is going to take us no time because we've already done it. So I don't need to take a break personally. Actually, I probably do need to take a 2-minute break, actually. The manual, what I'm calling the manual.
The manual. Those are the modules that you will be sending one after the other to the people who take your test. If you look at those student handouts, they're comprised of boxes. They're box after box after box after box. At the end of the student handouts, you've got the entire class. If you were to read the class, that's what you would read. Ideally not, but you know. And you will see that the boxes are there too. So the boxes in the student handout correspond
Okay, so can I just have 2 minutes for administrative, and then let's take a short break, okay? 2 minutes for administrative things. Everybody, if you're missing anything, see, hang on. Everybody up, everybody just so nobody misses it. If you're missing anything, just check in with Trish during the break, okay? 2 quick things. Trish is passing out just an evaluation of the training. That's just, you don't need to put your name on it or anything like that. That's just how is this training working for you this weekend. And it's very helpful feedback. I can make changes based on your feedback in the future. If you get a minute to fill this out, you can do this during the break, or please don't do it when we come back together, or 5 minutes after we finish. Either way is fine. Just turn them into Trish or leave them on the table back there. It's really helpful feedback for me, okay? But anonymous is great. No need for anything else. That's number 1. Number 2, just back to evaluations. Almost everybody filled out those 2 short questionnaires that we handed out on Friday night. A couple of you got them yesterday morning. What I'm asking, what I'm hoping you'll be willing to do is we're going to email you the same 2 things in about a month, okay? And I'm going to ask you to fill them out again and either mail them back or just scan them in and email them into Trish so you can, and just put the same ID on those that you put on the forms that you turned in this time. Whatever that was, use it again so that we can know this person, whoever you are, these are your answers from this time to next time, okay? That's helpful also to help us evaluate how we're doing in this training, okay? Is that okay with everybody? Yeah? If you want to be anonymous, which is 100% anonymous, just mail it back. You don't have to email it back to Trish as an attachment, but however you want to do it is fine. Okay, so any questions about that? Questions? Okay, so when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about validating skills. We actually literally have gone through 95% of this module already, so there's no reason to be repetitive, but there's 1 or 2 small things I want to talk about, and then we'll talk a little bit about problem management, and then I think we'll still have a little time for some questions at the end. Okay, so let's take maybe a 10-minute break. Is that okay?